I'm basically going to give you some key lessons from my combined experience. Normally, if I was doing a session like this, I would position myself as the practitioner guy, and Trevor, who's a scholar and works in the academy, would be the scholarship guy. We decided to flip that today, a little bit anyway. I'm going to take a stab at the sort of the theoretical scholarly underpinnings of some of this topic with a dash of my practitioner experience, and Trevor's going to take it from there. Hopefully we'll have some good discussion. Okay, so I'm mainly an NGO guy, 20 years or thereabouts, working with not-for-profits. I've been part of a lot of collaborative structures and processes. When I say collaborative structure and process, I mean partnerships, alliances, networks, coalitions, etc., hybrids, undefinable things. And I've seen a lot of good, bad, and ugly, and I've been responsible for a lot of good, bad, and ugly. And at one point in my career, when I was kind of frustrated working in the environmental sector, I said, I got to get out of this. I got to do something different. I think I'll go do a PhD, because I didn't really know what that was. And it sounded like maybe I could get some money to do it. So I ended up doing a doctorate on the factors that predispose collaborative structures and processes towards high levels of achievement or effectiveness, which I defined as synergistic performance. Now there's a mouthful. My daughter said to my sister-in-law one time, why didn't Dad do his PhD on something interesting, like an animal? So I do the PhD, and that's all good, 4 years in and out of Dal. And then I end up, thanks to the tenacious hard work of my friend and colleague, Dr. Barb Neese, I ended up here doing a postdoc. And it was adjacent research. This time I'm going to go digging into what's the story on these academic community partnerships that everybody's lauding and talking about. And I did a postdoc, 2 CURAs and 2 CIHR projects, Safety Net, Marguerite Mackenzie's Innu Language Dictionary, the Yarmouth Stroke Project, which was a big project in rural Nova Scotia, and the Rural Communities Impacting Policy Project, also a CURA, Dalhousie, Coastal Communities Network. And then, much to Barb's dismay, I abandoned the postdoc about 2/3 through and became the ADM of the Rural Secretariat in Government, first time in government in my life. So the experience you're going to get here, or the discussion, or the comments from me are kind of a hybrid of all of that. I won't say too much about the Rural Secretariat and the Office of Public Engagement. Maybe it'll come up in the questions. My biases are there. I kind of think I have a pretty integrated view of what's going on in the world of partnerships and collaboration, and I'm going to tell you what I think. So why do we collaborate? Some of this is really obvious, but I'll say it for the record. We collaborate because we need to. I like to cite the comment that we've made almost no progress towards sustainability since 1992 Rio. And one of the key factors discussed in the literature is our inability to solve complex problems because we continue to work largely in stovepipe or silos, or when we do work together, we're not that effective at it. Okay, but don't we do a lot of collaborating? Yes, collaboration has exploded onto the scene since about the 80s. It's moved from something you might do to a cure-all. Partnership language is everywhere. Just go Google partnership. See what you get. I think it might be 1 billion hits. Scholars, practitioners are more involved than ever. Processes, programs, frameworks, toolkits, websites are everywhere. This is good. Collaboration is on the rise. It's good for you, etc. However, cynicism and skepticism is on the rise in the world of collaboration. I knew that when I told people, what are you doing your PhD in? I'm doing it in blather, 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 collaborative, blather, blather, blather. Yeah, well, listen, I got to go. We tried that. That didn't work. Cynicism is emerging, bubbling up, and I submit that it's because of our naive approach to the broad world of collaborative practice. So, what are people saying? Well, collaboration can actually cause conflict. It can be a recipe for delay and inaction. It can lead to lowest common denominator solutions or mutual unhappiness. It can create more frustration than results. The costs often outweigh the benefits. It's time-intensive, difficult to manage, and in academia community settings, there's some special challenges which you know about because they're talked about widely in the world of public engagement and the university. You know, the contrast between an academic world and a community world can lead to disagreements over what you're up to and why you're doing it, the speed, the products envisioned. With any type of scholarly engagement work, the investments are often not or are poorly rewarded in academic structures. Also in government, by the way. The high collaborators, the dedicated collaborators, are often more likely to get into trouble than to be rewarded. So we know it's important, and many of us have been involved in a lot of good collaborative work. I'm not trying to undercut collaboration. I'm actually an advocate of better collaborative practice. We need to know more about what separates the bad practice from the good practice. And I don't think we've done a lot of critical thinking on what drives effectiveness or synergistic performance. So my view is that too few collaborative entities harness the latent synergy that's created once you form the beast. Most of us say, hey, we'll create a partnership and now we got synergy. Well, no, you don't. I'm sorry, you do not. You might have a platform for it or a platform for efficiencies and effectiveness and new ideas and creativity and better and bigger and faster things, but it's just a platform and it's not harnessed until you do something about it, and that's where the hard work begins. So, what does scholarship tell us about all of this? Not as much as you'd think. It's a relatively new topic. You know, the idea, if you start digging into literature in the world about partnerships and collaboration, unless you start using different words and you really want to get sort of into the theoretical underpinnings of participatory democracy and communitarianism, you're pretty well stuck around the 70s and 80s when collaboration and partnership became kind of a word for everything. Every conference was about partnerships and collaboration. I did a search of the Auditor General's reports from way back in the federal government system for decades, and you could see when partnerships started to become the rage, and then when it sort of dropped off. There's lots on the concept of intra-organizational behavior. You know, you got an organization and stuff goes on inside it and everybody's trying to figure that out. There's not so much on what happens when you get groups of organizations together. The level of complexity rises tremendously, and we've been using knowledge and ideas from intra-organizational study to inform our collaborative practice, and it's helpful to some degree, but it's not all there. Okay, so there's limited theory. There's no actual theory of collaboration. There's a bunch of awesome theories out there that if you dig into them, they can really inform your understanding of why these things get created, what are the motivations and what are the processes and what's happening behind them, why do they fail. For instance, open systems theory is a great thing. I won't speak too much about it, but the idea that an organization, a collaborative structure, is open to its environment and therefore can get buffeted around by external factors, which they all do. Contingency theory, negotiated order theory, social exchange theory, stakeholder theory. All disciplines have something to say about collaborative practice. All can offer insights. There's a lot of stuff out there, despite the limits and the newness of the topic, I guess. Interest is still growing, although I think it's becoming a little bit tougher. And I'm happy about that. I think we need more critical thinking about our practice. I think we have to move quickly. I think we're at the edge of tossing the baby out with the bathwater. In fact, you see some literature in the business literature. Businesses are starting to go it alone. The promise of partnership or collaboration has been unfulfilled. It's a lot of, I read you some of that stuff. So what have I learned from all of these sort of vantage points? It's very hard work. We often underestimate how hard it is. We should probably embark on fewer collaborative journeys and do them better than do more. Quality over quantity. We start a lot of these collaborative structures and have no way to end them or to terminate them, and they become ghost nets. They float to the surface and they get reactivated 5 minutes and then they sink to the bottom again. I think we need to know how better to make them biodegradable. Biodegradable partnerships is kind of a term I use around. We often overstructure them. We build them really structured when they should be nimble, and we understructure them and people get in trouble and get sued and they have HR problems because there is no structure. All sectors do them differently. Business, labor, government, academia, and civil society all use different languages, have different ideas. NGOs typically want to move fast and want results, and academics tend to want to sort of like be thoughtful and reflective. And so these things come together in the multi-stakeholder partnership, the multi-sectoral, multi-stakeholder, everybody and the kitchen sink partnership. I think what we're doing there is we're confusing the general understanding need for inclusiveness and diversity in our problem solving with the idea that they all have to be at the same table all the time. And I think you create a lot of frustration that way. Okay, I got to cut to the chase because I'm running out of time. Multi-stakeholder processes are the most difficult. They have the most complexity, and they can create all kinds of problems for people. Okay, let me just see here now. I'm going to skip through some stuff. Oh yeah, let's talk about synergy. Synergy is the idea that a bunch of things come together in a collaborative synergy world, and I can talk about that if you ask me a question about it. When these entities that I looked at all across Canada and all around Atlantic Canada, I looked at model forests, big, ugly labor, business, corporate, activists, academia entities, 15 years of age. I looked at them and asked everybody involved, like, were they ever working well? What was going on there? When were they low? What was going on there? When we can identify these pockets of time or space where things were really, really at optimal performance, you see that they don't last. They kind of wax and wane. As many of you know, I often use the marriage metaphor for this. It's like the marriage that waxes and wanes and rises and falls. Good time, or the family. How about the family? Do you have a good family or a bad family, Rob Greenwood? He would say, well, it depends. It depends which period of time you're talking about. These structures wax and wane. They have high points and low points. Some of them have more high points than low points, though. So what are the factors? The factors you will recognize. What's key about these factors is that I could not find a single factor through the eyes of all the participants in the various studies, the 2 studies I did, and all the literature, despite the fact that somebody will often say, oh, it's all about the money. Oh, it's all about the leader. No, I can show you a partnership where they had no leadership, or a partnership without any money, or where the money caused the problem, etc. So there's there's not the 7 factors of effective collaboration. There's the 26 factors that predispose a partnership towards synergistic performance. They're the common things you know, but they come together in confluences. You need ambitious and practical work. You need meaningful participation. You need a unique work scope. You need members that are bought into the idea that they want to work together. When it comes to the academic world, I'll just tell you about one little project we did. Our approach at the Rural Secretariat is to work with a citizen-based council in a region who identifies a need. Then we broker relationships with academics who are interested, much like the Harris Center would broker from the inside out. We would broker it from the outside in. We often work with Rob and his team. And we would try and put a team together, a nimble, informal team that would talk about their shared, maybe complementary, as opposed to common objectives on the matter at hand. And they would start with some public engagement or some citizen engagement, usually part of the data collection, and basically build with scholars like Dr. Kelly Vauden and Ryan Gibson and others that some of you would know. We would do on the Burin Peninsula, for example, the example I'm thinking about, we would build a project that would have the community involved, but mostly the academics would do the work to protect some academic integrity and rigor, and then we'd want that. But there'd be a coming together, an informal coming together to work on something that both could use. Both would own the product. The publisher, the people could publish, the community could have some results, and they would use that as a stepping stone to better engage the community and talk to the academics again. What we're basically doing is using a community-based research project to begin a relationship that would extend over time, but would not be a permanent structure, a permanent entity with a budget and a staff needing watering and weeding and caring. It would just be something nimble and inflexible. So my bottom line to my last point to you, because I'm over time now, is it's important not to marry everybody you meet. You can only be in so many complex partnerships, And if you're in really bad ones that are lame, you need to start some dialogue about how to get out of them, because as long as everybody you know is captured by collaborative structures that aren't doing much, they're not achieving much more beyond the often enormous time and energy costs, you probably should try and park them and try and do something new. So if we could be more thoughtful about our collaborative work, that would be really excellent. And that's my key message to you. Thank you very much.
I'm going to tell you my story, tell you a little bit about some projects I've been involved in, and then hopefully through your questions you will have some answers, or get some answers that you want with respect to what is effective and responsive collaboration. There's a good reason why Bruce went before me. I know nothing about anything theoretical or frameworks or protocols with respect to community engagement. I just do it. So it's never a starting point for me. It's never something that I don't set out to study or to do community engagement. I use it to address my questions. And over the last 30 years, working across this province and across the Arctic, I think community engagement has become progressively a larger part of my research agenda. And I want to illustrate that to you by telling you about 2 or 3 projects. So time is short, so I'm not going to be able, this isn't a research seminar, I'm not going to tell you results or anything like that. I'm just going to let you intersect with those projects and give you enough information that you can maybe ask me some questions on it afterwards. So, as an early career scientist, I would study landscape evolution in the high Arctic with respect to glacial history and climate change. I would fly up to the Arctic, live in a tent for 6 to 8 weeks in the absolutely remote part of Ellesmere Island, and fly back down again. There was usually I never even entered a community. According to the little pamphlet that we were given in our handouts, that is called disengaged research, and I did it very effectively for my graduate and postdoctoral career those years. When I came back to Memorial as an assistant professor in the early 90s, I started to work with Priscilla Renouf in archaeology on the Northern Peninsula Landscape and Archaeology project. And this was my first encounter with an opportunity to work with communities. We had these ideas about where archaeological sites should be found on the Northern Peninsula. Known sites today are mostly in communities where people digging gardens and digging foundations uncover these sites. We felt that the most important sites were in fact probably outside those communities. And the last thing we wanted to do was to spend a summer in the woods on the Northern Peninsula. If you've ever tried doing that, it's not a pretty scene. Sweat and fly bites. And so we thought, well, hang on a second. There are people who know probably where there are archaeological sites, the people in the communities. So we started a project that basically went around the entire Northern Peninsula. We knocked on every door of every house in the Northern Peninsula, and we asked them about archaeological sites and artifacts that they knew about. This was important to the local archaeological associations and resource development organizations on the Northern Peninsula. They were trying to create inventories to, I guess, promote tourism and also to trigger more research in the communities. So they got something out of it and we got something out of it. And in fact, if I go back to the sheet, I learned today that that's called cooperative research, cooperative community engagement. And that's what we were doing. And I just don't want to make it absolutely clinical. It meant a lot to me as a researcher. It was very meaningful to me because, of course, people have been living on the landscape of the Northern Peninsula for 6,000 years continuously. And so having people give me information about their cultural heritage, whether it's something they've uncovered in the woods at their cabin or something they dug up in their garden, I think is really important that we treat that information carefully, but also share it back to them again, and so that they could use it themselves to promote tourism in their region. And so our information was converted into poster boards, which were laminated and put all around the Viking Trail, which you can still see today. That was one project. The second project I want to talk to you about is one maybe you're more familiar with, and that is the soil lead project in St. John's. This was a project that, like most of mine, started out with a very simple physical science question. Where did the lead come from that we find in the sediments of urban lakes around St. John's? And is it we didn't ask this question, but we should have. Is it a health hazard? But we just started off with that very innocent question. It was unfunded research. It was a summer student who went out with permission, sampled some soils around St. John's. Of course, over the period of 5 to 10 years, that grew into a very large $500,000 Health Canada funded biomonitoring study of children's lead exposure in St. John's. It was a pretty remarkable experience for me to take that from something that was curiosity-driven sort of research right up to that level. I just want to read you a quote from the Regional Director General of Health Canada, who wrote to the 3 PIs, that's David Allison, the Medical Officer for Health for the region, Jacinth David, who worked for Health Canada, and myself. What he said was, engaging the community in the creation of a multi-stakeholder project advisory committee, seeking their advice on the path forward and ensuring their awareness and support of the project clearly demonstrates how outreach and engagement can facilitate success. Health Canada is continually seeking opportunities to increase our activity in this area, and your hard work to incorporate this into the project is a great success story. Our partnership with you in this project is an excellent example of how, by working together, we can enhance our understanding of environmental contaminants and their effects on human health. I had no experience of doing health research when I started that project, but it was something that I learned was really important in the success of the project. We needed to recruit 250 families who were willing to bring their 6-month to 6-year-old child into the Janeway and have a syringe of blood taken from them for the sake of health science, essentially. So it was a real challenge to us, and we needed to work very closely with the community, and we needed to have a balance between the communications and the outreach that we did with the community to recruit them, but also not to cause undue alarm. So I learned a lot about health risk communication during that process. What I learned was from a very shaky beginning, because that summer student project where we had soil lead levels from around the city was leaked to the media during a provincial election. And suddenly something that I had this sort of curiosity interest in was suddenly out of my control. And sitting around in very large meetings with all the communications directors of provincial government, I soon learned how these sorts of things work. I learned how they could suppress an issue with a good communication strategy. Essentially, they recruited David Allison, who will admit to this himself, who had a very good profile from the previous summer around water issues, stand up in a press conference and say, this is interesting but not alarming. And in those couple of words managed to dispel all prominence of the issue during the provincial election. My point in saying that is that I learned from that process. When we eventually moved towards the health exposure part of the project, I decided to hire that director of communications, who is now a private consultant. And we developed a communications strategy for our project, which she went on to win a Golden Quill Award for that communication strategy. And we created a plan which was adjacent to the science. The science was very important. The science was being driven by partners in medicine here at the university, but also it was driven by that community stakeholder need. So I can talk more about that if you have a specific question. One of the really enjoyable aspects of this project was the fact that the community rallied around the project, and the community developed an organization, the St. John's Safer Soil Project, which has been continuously going now for almost 7 or 8 years, much to the energy of Laurie Heat downtown. And what she does is she promotes gardening and recreation to create in elevated lead soils of St. John's. I participate in that organization as much as I can. We bring in speakers from all across North America. And it really has, I think, demonstrated how research can be mobilized out into the community and can address an important societal issue. I think I could talk a lot about soil lead. I could talk about the recent stories in December about the link between blood lead levels in the US and crime rates across all the cities in the US. There's a lot of interesting literature coming out now. But I'm going to leave it there and move on to the third project I wanted to highlight. And over the past decade, I've been back in Labrador again doing lots of research with people like Louise Hermanitz in the front here and John Jacobs on the Labrador Highlands Research Group, looking at all sorts of biophysical research and climate change adaptation. And then at some point we came down out of the mountains of Labrador and into the communities to talk about what those important science messages mean for the community. Also in 2010, only 3 years ago, I was asked to participate in a research forum in the community of Nain in Nunatsiavut. And this is a young government who are struggling with trying to understand what is the role and place for research in this new government. They were basically a little bit fatigued by the research situation. And as they always told me, it wasn't research fatigue, it was mostly researcher fatigue. And they were sort of trying to understand what to do about it. So they pulled together people from all the communities in Nunatsiavut and had a forum. And they invited just a handful of researchers. And I wanted to just read to you some of the outcomes from their forum and their observations about research. Research should be relevant to a community's health and quality of life. Forum participants agreed that the closer researchers get to communities, the better the outcomes. Community-connected and driven research is more meaningful, acceptable, and sustainable than transient research activity. The people and government of Nunatsiavut must take ownership of the region's research agenda and manage that agenda in a manner that is mutually beneficial to all stakeholders. Research is an industry that can build capacity with our people and help sustain our culture and our knowledge. Individual research activities and the complete body of research should leave a legacy for the community. I think that attending that research forum, participating in all the events that they had like sort of dating a researcher and all of these sorts of things that were going on, ways in which we were able to sell our research out to the community, really transformed my attitude towards community engagement and community collaboration. After the workshop, they asked me if I would become a researcher and champion of research for Nunatsiavut. And ever since then, that is what I've been doing. That research involves the best researchers, or the projects I'm going to describe involve the best researchers in the world, from Harvard University, from our own Memorial University, involves health, physical and social scientists. And it's very well funded, federally, provincially, regionally, and by the Tri-Council. Probably last year, about over $1 million of research being conducted by the Nunatsiavut government, addressing priority regional issues in Nunatsiavut for Labrador Inuit. I want just to describe 3 projects, 1 line each. Three of them that I'm involved with. The Sustainable Communities Initiative. That has its overall goal to try to inform best practices and really provide guidance for enhancing community sustainability on the north coast of Labrador. So we're looking at everything from infrastructure design, community planning, energy security, food security. The second one is called Lake Melville, Our Environment, Our Health. And that's where we're looking at the downstream impacts of the Lower Churchill project on communities and people and well-being in Lake Melville. The third one is called the Voisey's Bay Mine 10-Year Review, and that's where we're conducting a midterm review of industrial activities at the Voisey's Bay mine site, and trying to develop appropriate indicators of social, economic, health, environmental, economical, biophysical effects on the communities of Nunatsiavut. I just want to finish by saying what are the insights I can provide you with in 30 years of doing research, cooperatively, sometimes disengaged, sometimes engaged, and more recently, I think, a true collaborative research project. Listen and be receptive. Be flexible and adapt. Be patient and take time. By that I mean build relationships, understand local situations. Be realistic and deliver on your promises. Take risks, but expect the unexpected. And finally, make a sustained commitment. Thank you very much.